So you know how the internet has a funny way of coming out and saying, this bad thing was actually not as bad as you think. So once upon a time I was just playing with my bronze attack Bakugan Pyrus Dragonoid at 660G power. Here's a pic of that absolute bad boy, by the way. When I stumbled upon this article from 2024 that reads, this controversial teen drama reboot wasn't as bad as you think. No shade to the writer, everyone is entitled to their own opinion. I just happen to be of the opinion that Gossip Girl Reboot is actually as bad as you think. Actually, nah fam, I think it is way worse. But do you know what would be absolutely better? If you sub to this channel. If you haven't noticed, the channel is less than 2k subs away from 20k, so maybe let's get there, maybe not. And if you do not sub, well, that's fine. I will just use some very dark ancestral Baltic spells to make sure that your Bakugans never open ever again. This is indeed a very serious threat, so make sure to subscribe. And you may think that the sudden vitriol for a show that everyone forgot coming from me comes from the fact that, you know, this is a reboot and I am some butthurt fan of the original series, but nah, I have actually never seen the original in full. And I say in full because I did try, I just quickly stopped. I wasn't exactly there when it first aired, I was just 11 when the final season was being put out there. No, what drew me to this shit show in the first place was Elite actually, which does sound a bit like a full circle moment considering that Elite was very likely to be inspired by the likes of the original Gossip Girl. But anyhow, if you don't recall, the summer of 2021 was when season 4 aired, and by that point, Elite had begun to go down the gutter. Literally a month after the 4th season dropped, Gossip Girl Reboot would begin airing, and the trailer of Gossip Girl Reboot was actually sick. It served vibes. It felt like something I would like after watching Elite. But little did I know that Gossip Girl Reboot would make the worst seasons of Elite look like masterpieces. Gossip Girl Reboot wishes it was like Elite. It thinks it is, but doesn't realize that in comparison to Elite, it sounds like it was written for kindergartners. So, the show gives you the cliff notes on what exactly Gossip Girl was in the original show, which is helpful for someone like me who hasn't really seen the original. This is also why some things I will say can come up as blasphemies against the OG GG, so forgive me for those, or don't. So Gossip Girl used to be a website gossip blog that detailed the lives of the elite students of this fancy rich school, which is appropriate for the time that the show is set in. Now, as per my knowledge, the original show was controversial to say the least. It had a reputation. For me, it has the reputation of the show that produced Peppa Who? Pig Girl. But I digress. I suppose it can be somewhat argued that this show wouldn't exactly be replicable as it was in the context of modern day sensibilities. I guess I somewhat can agree with that. I am more of a subscriber to it's not what you depict but how you depict mentality 90% of the time, but the showrunner of the reboot seems to fully agree. One of his now infamous tweets proclaims loudly that no slut-shaming, no catfights, those are not things I believe need to be in the show for it to be fun, or any show. GG2 is sex positive and our characters use their brain, not their brawn, to take you out. So there are a few things to pick apart here naturally. First, it's not exactly an awfully wrong stance to have, but it is a weird statement in the context of Gossip Girl. I am not sure anyone tunes into a show about rich kids to be taught a moral lesson or come out feeling and becoming a better person on the other side of it. Second, I feel like it is fine to try and be mindful about being problematic, if that is what is being implied here. But you will find out really fast that Gossip Girl is very problematic, but in rather other ways than I can only guess the original ironically was not. Anyhow, you better be frigging sure that this perspective proceeds to color the show in every facet. And the biggest offender of this is the show's namesake, Gossip Girl. The show imagines this gossip thing as a tool for social justice rather than just let it be a gossip rag, which is kind of preposterous if you ask me, but whatever. Another difference between the OG GG and this one is that the last time the GG was revealed to be run by one of the students. This time, however, the show invents a contrived sequence of events and makes the teachers make Gossip Girl. This decision surely has been dragged through the internet already, I just cannot go on and not point out how insane of an idea that is. So the show begins by showing one of the teachers in the show, Kate Keller, getting to school and
Sorry, Miss Keller, I didn't see you there. It wasn't your fault. She almost destroyed your capucine. It'd take her whole month's salary to replace it.
Then we get to see one of the teachers cry because the rich kids complained about her refusing to change a grade.
Got fired. Something about me refusing to change a grade last year.
So a few things right off the bat. This all happens in the first 11 minutes of the show. This is a fun allusion to the fact that the show has no fucking chill with its pacing. Anyhow, another thing is that these are very ham-fisted attempts to show how hard it is for the teachers. I guess valid. But then this type of behavior is not really kept up further beyond the first half of the pilot, at least not with what we are shown on screen. So one of the teachers who apparently was around during the OG GG tells the others that there was a thing called old Gossip Girl that existed way back when, and says that they lived under constant threat and that it kept the students accountable.
We lived under constant threat. It was this thing that started freshman year, called itself Gossip Girl. She kept us all accountable.
So the teachers decide to remake it again in the first 11 minutes of the show and make an Instagram account under the name Gossip Girl. There's also this very real vape smoke at 11 minutes 37 seconds of the pilot, by the way. So their whole mission statement is that they will keep the devil incarnate rich kids accountable. This mission statement is important to remember due to the reasons about to be revealed. And the main person behind it becomes the teacher named Kate Keller. Then we get introduced to the main cast. The main cast notably includes a not rich character who comes from a way less privileged background and is a newcomer at the rich kid school. Her name is Zoya Lott. She's 14 years old and she happens to be half-sister to a rich kid character named Julian Calloway. This is clearly the catalyst of the rich kid's narrative of the show that the show itself chooses. A key word here, since Zoya comes in and kinda shakes things up in a show that centers around a gossip rag that seeks to humble rich kids. So, here's a question for y'all. Can y'all smell the problem here yet? No? Okay, let's move forward then. So one of the first storylines that the reboot focuses on is that the two sisters are coming together after Zoya moves to New York and begins attending the rich kid school. The two sisters basically manufacture Zoya's move to New York so the two of them could finally meet since they have been pen pals for a long while. There is some family lore there around that, it's kinda sad, but whatever. They're kind of sort of the two main leads of the season, as their storyline and more so Julian's take the lead a lot of the time and has the biggest developments. And do you know one of the first things that the Gossip Girl posts? The page proceeds to post a bunch of posts that in one way or another harmed Zoya. The one student in the entire cast who is not rich and comes from a privilege-less background. First, they exposed that Julian basically paid for Zoya to be there and cheated the system, which I guess is a fair point, but then Zoya gets most of the backlash for it. Then one of the teachers captures a pic of Zoya with Obi, Julian's boyfriend, doing relatively innocent stuff, but then makes up lore around it which also harms Zoya directly. The even more aggravating fact about this is that Kate Keller is also not a very privileged character, and then she proceeds to use that sort of down-to-earthness to get closer with Zoya, and pretends to be her friend, ally, mentor, you name it. Meanwhile, she's just straight up dragging that kid with the help of Gigi. And this is what really pisses me off the most about the show, because it has one singular character in the Schoolers cast, who represents someone who doesn't come from privilege, which the show then proceeds to put in the direct blast trajectory of a gossip rag who is supposed to make rich kids accountable. The show also admits this in the first episode of the second season, by the way.
You know me?
Yeah, I'm Julian Calloway's
Yeah, no,
sister.
I know who you are. You are the star of Gossip Girl.
Right,
So you may see how focusing the season on Zoya and Julian is not only a shit idea, but it also flies directly into the face of the main idea behind Gossip Girl. But then we also get to Gossip Girl talking about the actual rich kids. And those rich kids, they are not actually that bad, at least in comparison to the teachers. I have no idea how the show does this, but it makes the teachers so unlikable that they actually side with the rich kids on this one. Since the showrunner states that he would rather not do the controversial and problematic things that the original TV show did, the kids are actually not that bad either way. Sure, they do some questionable things like icing Zoya out for no real reason except classism or some bullying. That disappears pretty quickly or is painted by the show as bad either way by the rich kids themselves as the show progresses. The first episode, aka the shittiest pilot in the Milky Way galaxy, has a very strong vibe of what the fuck when you see Zoya and Julian sit in a car and talk about their dead mom and share some real trauma. Meanwhile, you realize that a bunch of adults are plotting their downfall to hold them accountable. The show also displays how gleefully the teachers try to collect info on the said dead mom, and we are supposed to root for them how exactly? Then we also have one of the other characters, Audrey's mother, end up in a hospital, and everyone coming together to comfort her. And the show proceeds to play another monologue by Gossip Girl that talks about how rich kids abuse their privilege.
Yes, maybe I'd begun to wonder if I was abusing my considerable power when I realized you're the ones who do that. I'm your mirror. I show you your bad parents, your absent teachers, your errant friends. Mine is the only voice you need to listen to anyway. Because if you were kinder to one another,
Like, the cognitive dissonance here, you know? And would you like to know more about the supposed privilege that Gossip Girl keeps talking about? For that, let's break down the cast of characters. So the show generally suffers from a problem that Elite also suffered from the first season of that show, which that is isolation. You can very easily divide the show into specific spheres, which the characters are usually stuck in like a swamp. So we already touched upon Julian and Zoya, but there is also the character of Obi attached in there too, and they keep just bouncing around each other back and forth in an endless loop for a season. Then there's also Audrey and her boyfriend, Akeno, trying to open their ship and get Max in the middle of them, because apparently they just cannot do it without him anymore.
This is not fair. I feel icky looking at him without you in the frame as well.
And yeah, that is basically it. Sure, we get deviations into things like the parents of these kids, but let me tell you, not a lot of these storylines result in these kids exercising their rich privilege specifically in any way whatsoever. Again, it is exhausting to watch the show actively gaslight you into thinking that these kids are some demons who do some fucked up shit, when that is not exactly the case at all. Actually, if anything, Gossip Girl comes out as the most problematic in this entire thing, even without knowing the identities of who is behind it. Another thing that massively pissed me off in this show is something that happens at the end of the first season and then carries over into the second one. So at the end of the first season, as a finale, Julian makes a deal with Gossip Girl from, and darlings, I wish I was joking with this, one bitch to another, that Julian would send a mix of real tips and fake tips to Gossip Girl, and that Gossip Girl wouldn't know which is which. Then, this delusional moron dares to say that,
I don't mind Gigi. I learned a lesson from her putting our shit out there. Secrets just blow up in our faces.
and you know what kind of a tip Julian proceeds to send in? That Max, Aki, and Audrey are a throuple. And that does piss me off, and not necessarily because Julian sends this. Yes, sure, she's extremely unlikable and horrible for doing this, but Gossip Girl is extra horrible considering that the account proceeds to post this with a snarky caption.
Just 3 little piggies in one blanket.
The adults being the ones running it makes this infinitely worse, but even without that, what the fuck does the show thinks it is doing? And this really reaches its peak when you remember that the show's tone is Goo Goo Gaga kindergarten. The show proceeds to play this off as a joke in a sequence where Audrey and Aki want to make it seem like they break up with Max. In what universe is making a polyamorous queer relationship holding anyone accountable and making them better? So it only makes sense how the socially progressive Gossip Girl of the year of 2021 has no qualms whatsoever about making queer, private relationships public, and all of that against the rhetoric about how Gossip Girl is making kids better. And I cannot understate just how deep the show is in this particular delusion. I swear to you, there is a streak of episodes where this grand design of Gossip Girl is brought up at least once, almost word for word.
I found Gossip Girl surprisingly helpful. My students have seemed more mindful of what they say and what they do around each other.
I agree. I'd even go so far as to say the students are more respectful to us as well.
I don't want Gossip Girl to be done. I've grown to like it. Makes people talk face to face. It forces conversations that would never be had, even this one. What you've done, it isn't just important, it's vital.
Then there is the predator teacher out of all of them, who tells them that what they are doing is bad.
What you're doing to those kids, they're turning against each other. You're not making them better, Kate. Be careful. You've read enough to know this doesn't end well for anyone. I agree.
And I mean, I don't want to say that this dude, who by the way preyed on an underage student, is right, but I mean, he is freaking right. But then, the teachers proceed to expand Gossip Girl to other schools, as if the show hasn't convinced you enough that the teachers are completely heartless towards these kids. And then one of them accused Kate, the woman who created this thing, that she is going soft. I like how my recording software just crashes and I have to re-record everything again. Yeah, this is the point where it crashed. Anyhow, as I was saying, that she was going soft on the kids.
You've stopped living your mission statement. You care too much about these kids. You're no longer correcting the problem. You're part of it. Sherry?
And here I thought that the show was exemplifying what the other teacher said about Gossip Girl being bad. But then, in the same episode, another teacher says this.
This thing, this experiment, you did change things. Rafa was wrong, the kids have gotten better. More polite, more aware, more afraid of us. But when you start pulling punches, you ruin the integrity of the idea.
But afraid of them how? The only way that the kids would become afraid of the teachers in this instance is that if they caught a whiff of the teachers potentially being Gossip Girl. Otherwise, there is just no way in which the kids would somehow revere teachers just because someone anonymously posts about them online. The show would like to disagree though, because the first signs of the supposed change happened way back in the beginning of the show. Right at the end of the pilot, in fact.
So sorry. It's all my fault. I like your blazer.
But let's move on. As the first season progresses around episode 9, it comes out that Julian's dad has essayed women. He's this huge music producer, so there is an inherent power imbalance. And then Kate Keller gets all concerned about how Gossip Girl has handled the situation. By that point, Gigi was taken over by other teachers because remember, they decided to expand for some reason. Gigi posts a picture of Julian and her father interacting and basically implying that they are working together and ruining Julian's reputation in the process. So this massive hypocrite walks up to the PE PE teacher, who has posted a photo through Gigi and has the caucasity to say,
Posted this morning about an influencer possibly being complicit in her dad's illicit issues was wrong and dangerous. Could ruin a kid's life.
Diva, darling, honey, where was all of this consideration when you were actively dragging an innocent, non-privileged student like Zoya Law through the mud on Gigi? Yes, Zoya has her moments, but she didn't at all deserve to be put directly on blast. Yet poor Julian gets all of the consideration in the world because why, exactly? If you hadn't seen the show, your mind might be fast to draw an arrow between her shenanigans with Zoya and then Gigi's shenanigans with Julian, implying that there was any form of growth between that, so you can comfortably lay down your pens, because absolutely the fuck not. Remember the clips that I showed you before? Those clips come exactly between the instances of dragging Zoya and now Julian. The difference in treatment comes exclusively from the fact that these examples happen in different contexts of what the show pretends to tackle. The instance with Zoya was all about holding the kids of the school accountable. Therefore, Zoya being not of the same class became a footnote at best in considering who to target. The instance with Julian comes in the context of a very Me Too storyline in which women are put in a more delicate light. And while I agree with the delicacy Julian's situation was given in this moment by Kate, you can clearly see that the show is merely virtue signaling when it serves them. When Gigi posted about Zoya and Obi potentially being together in one of its first ever posts, it had no consideration of how it would reflect on either Obi or Zoya, and just outright implies, no actually it fucking states, that Zoya is becoming the other woman in Obi and Julian's relationship, while gleefully remarking about how the sisters are not only sharing their DNA.
Hey JC, looks like DNA isn't all you and your sister share.
It is not even what this TV show does that bothers me, it is how. The problem is that the show doesn't find anything at all wrong with Gigi. On the contrary, it thinks that they are fucking right. I'm doing an insane courtesy towards the show by just skipping over entire pages of notes of multiple scenes where Gossip Girl just straight up does not make any sense whatsoever. And here's just some of them if you are interested to see. It's just this insane mentality that the show keeps on pushing and pushing and pushing about how kids are actually improving that bothers me endlessly, when it isn't the case at all, nor would it ever be. Which brings us all back to the fact that the show is just a hollow, vapid depiction of supposed issues it seeks to include. It just does a bunch of lip service that warps reality in nonsensical ways to service this weird need to appeal to social justice. And this is before we get to the mechanics of the show's non-existent characters and plot. So this is a teen TV show about high school. It rather makes sense that it doesn't necessarily have some huge high-octane, overarching plot. It also makes sense that the primary focus would be on relationships between people, and that would result in the plot kinda. But my god, does the show feel like it's running in circles. God. First, the show moves at an insane speed and takes zero time to actually flesh out any of its moments. And second, because it keeps rushing and rushing and rushing, it ends up running around in circles because it doesn't have enough ideas and ends up rehashing the same things over and over again. And the ideas for a plot that they have, straight up awful. And for that, let us begin with the pilot episode again, which is, at the risk of repeating myself, one of the worst pilot episodes for a television show I have ever witnessed, perhaps ever. So we have the arrival of Zoya Law to the rich kids school. She tries to blend in with the rich kids and her half-sister's friend group and kind of flops at that, whatever. Then Gossip Girl inserts herself and pits the sisters against one another. So then Julian's friends Luna and Monet feel the need to reclaim the narrative and push Zoya out completely. Julian doesn't exactly agree to this, but they don't care. There's this huge fashion show thing and Julian walks the catwalk. So do you know how Julian's friends decide to achieve this? So Monet proceeds to bump into Zoya on purpose and makes her drop her phone and then swaps out the phones on the ground. As if anyone in the year of 2021 wouldn't recognize that they are holding someone else's phone. Then Luna asks another friend, Max, to come with her to the bathroom and then proceeds to take a photo of his Bakugans with Zoya's phone and then airdrop the photo to everyone. And this is all somehow a very big own, a huge L for Team Z, which gets her kicked out of the event. Then she passes by the stage dramatically and stares at Julian, who is having her little moment. And then someone takes a photo of that and Gossip Girl posts it, and then Zoya and Julian have a fight about it, which goes like this.
I had no idea Monet and Luna were gonna do that. Why didn't you stop it? What happened? You stood there. Worse, you liked it. No, I didn't.
Which Julian somehow had to step down the stage, go and ask around to find out what happened and then stop it. But anyway.
You only care about how other people see you.
which is kind of a bold-ass statement to say since we are literally just in the pilot, and y'all have known each other IRL for half an hour of screen time. Then Obi proceeds to break up with Julian due to her being an influencer taking up much of their relationship. And I feel like this could have been an arc for at least a couple of episodes, or the first episode if all the fluff was removed. They literally just got together in the same place and were already at each other's throats by the next episode. Then comes the second episode, and this tension between Julian and Zoya is kept up, because Zoya begins kinda getting together with the cardboard cutout that is Obi, but then stuff goes down where Zoya spends time with Obi, Julian sees that and kinda tries to interfere, Zoya becomes hell-bent on leaving Constance, and guess what? Julian has a revelation that actually she should just stay away from Obi and just be at peace with Zoya. Again, rather fast, all of this beef lasts for a grand total of 1 episode. But that's good, right? Then in episode 4, Julian's friends do the same shenanigans once again and put Julian and Zoya against each other again, and then her friends once again stage another humiliation ritual in front of everybody. This time their beef ends the same episode. But then comes around episode 6, when Julian and Zoya get into a beef again after Julian dares to attend the protest together with Obi. And this happens in the first 6 episodes. The show manufactures beef between Zoya and Julian 2 separate times via the same means. And third time they just decide to make Zoya act out over nothing. Then we also get the throuple, who keep moving at a glacial pace in their development. Every time they seem to hit some sort of a development, the show then slows down and drags that thing out. These 3 people just keep having the most useless drama over and over and over again. Take forever to finally do shit, and it just gets so insanely boring. Like for instance, here we have in season 2 episode 5 the 2 men of the throuple, Aki and Max, going on a trip without their third, Audrey. Audrey is initially fine with it, but then a random background extra comes up to her out of nowhere and tells her that
Aki's one great tick away from dedicated. Mark my words, you'll be a solo by Sunday.
And that messes with her and proceeds to cause drama. Then we have Max feel insecure about being left out. Then we have Aki get insecure about being left out. There's like a streak of episodes where these 3 characters each pass the baton to each other over the isolation insecurities episodically until, of course, things eventually just blow up. There are times when the show does seemingly get a grip. For example, I did somewhat like what he did with Audrey's mom, or the poor attempts at stakes in the second season by introducing a character who wants to figure out who Gigi is, or the storyline with Obi and his mom in the second season where he tries to bring her down for shady stuff, but the sister did it and she's covering for her sister because motherly love. And that is about it on that. And there's one thing that could potentially fix all of this. That is having actual characters. That, however, Gossip Girl does not. I mean, we do have people walking around the set and talking, they do have assigned names that everyone refers to them as, they have lines that they say at each other, but most of them feel like nothing. You see, the issue with not wanting to be as controversial is that the show takes that to the extreme and produces characters that are so devoid of any actual deep flaws that they lose any depth whatsoever. Every conflict that characters have is not really a conflict. It is a place for the show to be completely mindful, to make storylines not really storylines, but models as to how to healthily talk to each other and resolve conflict. Except, that is literally not why anyone would come to a TV show about the children of elites attending school. Call me cynical, but I have little faith in Gossip Girl Reboot being a faithful and realistic representation of rich kids. Usually how it goes is that if rich kids come from richness, they don't really have the drive to actually care about social justice. Sure, there are exceptions, but I doubt that if you took a sample size of this cast out of real life, that it would produce the same results. When you have a certain amount of money, I think, social injustices become simply out of your reach since you simply don't face them. To me, these characters feel more so like Sims from Sims 4 specifically. Let this be on the record that I am referring to the Sims 4 people, the 4th installment, being played around with in a sandbox, and you just have to imagine scenarios between them and headcanon your way into making the show interesting. But the truth is that there is not an ounce of interesting in there. And for most of the characters who occupy most space, I cannot pinpoint a single character moment or trait that makes them stand out. Audrey, for example, I could not name anything of note about her. Same goes for Aki, except that the show tries to push this thing that he is a walking therapist, but that is just about it with him. He does not provide anything else except that he likes movies. Obi does not have anything within him except that he tries to do social justice. I won't even start on Julian because I still don't get her her character. The show swings back and forth between her being good, with everyone acknowledging that she was always good, and her being bad, with people telling straight to her face that she exploits everyone around her and is self-centered. The few characters that did seem mildly good were Zoya, Max, Monet, and Luna. And of course, the show mostly doesn't focus on these characters or their individual journeys as much, which would be way more interesting. No, instead it focuses on them in the context of way less interesting characters like Julian or Audrey or Aki. And I cannot even remember a single character moment because none of the character moments actually last or amount to anything. The show is stuck in this rut for some reason to make this show episodic, but by doing so it just continuously minimizes the things that should have impact or downplays stuff as soon as the next episode comes. It never really capitalizes on any drama. It always tries to just solve things by making people talk and be drama-free. So honestly, what the hell even is this show? I will give props. It looks good. But it is just baffling to me how a show can try so many things and get 0 of them right. 0. I kid you not, there is not a single shred of the show that functions as it should. Even if you think for an episode or two that things are looking up, well, think again, because no, they are not. The show is not above just warping things to suit its very performative and shallow narrative. It flops in so many ways. It's just spectacular. I have never seen a show that was so much about absolutely nothing at all. It thinks it eats, but it leaves all the crumbs. And speaking of consumption, now that I serve the tea, go piss, girl. You've earned it.